welcome to my kitchen. I'm Cheryl Johnson of Cheryl's Catering. Today I'm going to show you how to make a cream cheese velvet cake. The ingredients for the velvet cake are 2 cups of butter, 4 cups of sugar, 5 eggs plus 2 yolks, 3 teaspoons of vanilla, 7 cups of cake flour, 1 teaspoon of cocoa, 3 teaspoons of salt, 3 teaspoons of baking soda, 3 cups of water, 1 cup of non-fat sour cream, and 3 teaspoons of white vinegar. It's a recipe I developed based on the Southern style red velvet cake, but without all the artificial color. And it has no fat sour cream instead of buttermilk. No matter how many cakes I bake, I'm always excited to bake this velvet cake. It's one of my top favorites, so let's get started. I'm taking the 2 cups of softened butter and I'm putting it in a bowl. I'm going to cream it up so the sugar will be absorbed by the butter better. In the old days, they used to mix by hand. Thank goodness we now have machines. Now I mixed 4 cups of sugar into the creamed butter. I'll mix it until the sugar granules actually dissolve into the butter, helping to not weigh the cake down. It makes it rise better, making the cake more light. Then I'm going to scrape the bowl to get all those granules of sugar properly mixed. That way we make sure all the sugar becomes dissolved. Once the butter and sugar are fluffy and mixed together really well, it's time to add the 5 eggs and 2 egg yolks. You can use brown or white eggs for this recipe. Just make sure they're large eggs. I crack the whole eggs first into a separate bowl to help ensure no shells wind up in the cake. Then I separate the yolks by moving them from shell to shell, letting the whites drop down into another container to use later in a different recipe. Start the mixer on low and slowly add the eggs to the butter and sugar mixture, making sure that all the eggs get mixed in. Then I speed up the mixer to medium and mix well. A good bowl scraping is in order to make sure everything is combined. Now it's ready to have the vanilla added. It's important to use real vanilla in this recipe. Artificial vanilla just doesn't taste the same. And if you want that good old-fashioned flavor, you're going to have to use the real deal. You can really taste it in this cake. I add the vanilla very slowly so as not to splash out of the bowl. Mix until the vanilla can no longer be seen. So after the butter and sugar and eggs and vanilla, I'm going to add 1 cup no-fat sour cream. This also is part of the flavor combination and also helps to make the cake more tender along with the extra yolks. And using cake flour instead of all-purpose, that makes the cake more tender as well. I speed up the mixer to fully mix, and now I can get the flour ready. I'm going to sift 7 cups of cake flour, which is very important for this kind of cake, to use actual cake flour because it's a softer flour. If you use all-purpose flour, it's cake flour mixed with bread flour, so no matter what you do, cake or bread, you're kind of not doing it right. Bread should have bread flour and cake should have cake flour. Along with the 7 cups of cake flour, I'm going to sift into it some cocoa, some baking soda, and some salt. I'll put in half of the flour. The next ingredient is the salt. 3 teaspoons of salt. And a teaspoon of cocoa, and that helps give it that extra special flavor as well. And for the last of the dry ingredients, 3 teaspoons of baking soda. 2 and 3. And that's what helps the cake to rise. It's called leavening. There are different kinds of leavening. Baking powder and yeast are also examples of leavening. I'm going to put the rest of the flour into the sifter. And what's nice about this recipe is that it uses 1 whole bag of cake flour. There we go, sifting the dry ingredients together delicately at first so as to not have it jump out of the sifter all over the counter. We want to make sure and get this into the bowl at some point and not all over the counter. And once it goes down in volume, we can make it go a little bit faster. And once the dry ingredients are all sifted together, it's time to put in 3 cups of plain water. It's best if you put a little bit of flour, a little bit of water, a little bit of flour, a little bit of water. Keep alternating the wet and dry ingredients. Scrape the bowl to make sure that everything is going to be mixed in. You can see that the flour is still somewhat dry. Get all the way down to the bottom because you don't want any lumps in your batter. Lumps in a cake is bad. Back up we go. And continue to mix. You don't want to overmix or the cake will be tough. And finally, I'm going to add 3 teaspoons of white vinegar. That really makes the flavor stand out. And it's going to interact with the baking soda and cause a foaming reaction that's going to make the cake very light and fluffy. You can measure the vinegar and add it as you go, or put it in a small cup first in case you don't trust yourself not to spill. So in goes the 3 teaspoons, and then I'm going to crank the bowl up and down to make sure the vinegar gets evenly distributed. Tap the excess batter from the whip and then hand mix to ensure that it's all mixed up properly. You want to make good and sure. This recipe makes 75 cupcakes, or a half a sheet cake, or a 10-inch cake and 3 dozen cupcakes. I spread soft butter into the cake pan to prevent the cake from sticking when I remove it from the pan, and then sprinkle some flour over the butter. That helps as well. Gently pat the pan while tipping it to ensure even coating, especially on the sides. A wax paper liner will keep the cake from sticking in the pan when you go to get it out. Use the cake pan as a guide for cutting out a circle with a knife or box cutter. Trace the cutter around the bottom of the pan to get an exact fit. Then place the wax paper circle into the pan and spray some vegetable spray on it evenly and sprinkle some more flour on top. Now this cake is just about guaranteed to come out of the pan smoothly. For more even baking, I wrap strips soaked in water and pin them to the side of the cake pan. Now the batter is ready to be poured into the pan. I like to tip it around and let it stick to the sides, and then this helps it to not run over the side of the pan as easily. When I bake a cake, I don't just put the cake on the rack in the oven. I put a cushioned air baking pan underneath of it, and that also prevents the cake from getting too brown on the bottom. Bake it in a preheated 350-degree oven. Now for the cupcakes. I like to line the cupcake pans with another cupcake pan. That provides some insulation and prevents it from getting too brown on the bottom. The cupcakes will bake also at 350 degrees until just golden brown. Don't let them get too brown or they'll be dry. Place them on a cooling rack to cool slightly, then remove them from the pans to finish cooling. If you don't take them out of the pan, the bottoms will get a little bit of condensation on it and they can be soggy. A cake takes about 45 minutes to an hour to bake, and the cupcakes take about 15 to 20 minutes. If you poke the cake lightly and it springs back, then it's done. I'll put the cake on a rack to cool, and once it's thoroughly cool, I can ice it. While the cake is cooling, I'm going to cover a cardboard cake circle with a piece of tin foil, and that's going to give the cake a nice base for transporting and ease of cleanup. You can level the high spot that's in the middle sometimes by taking a knife and just running it along the top of the cake pan. That way you get a nice, even, level cake, which is important. So it's time to take the cake out of the pan. You invert the cooling rack on the top of the cake and then just flip it over. You should take the cake out of the pan while it's still somewhat warm, not entirely cool. It'll come out of the pan easier if there's a little bit of heat. There we go. Be sure and peel off that wax paper or the cake will be a little bit hard to chew. Now it's time to start the cream cheese icing. The first thing that goes into the bowl is the softened butter. You should still have some chill to it, otherwise the icing will be too soft. And once it's a little bit mixed up, I add some hydrogenated vegetable shortening. Just like approximately an equal amount. The shortening gives the icing a fluffy body. That gets mixed up together. Then a little bit of powdered sugar to bind them together. Then goes in half of the bag of powdered sugar and 1 teaspoon of real vanilla. Mix it up a little more. Then break the cream cheese in half and put it in there. Cream cheese is a little bit soft, so the icing will never be stiff enough to decorate. So we're going to make regular cream cheese icing. Scrape the bowl. And the more you whip it, the softer it's going to get. The rest of the powdered sugar goes in. And another teaspoon of liquid, which is going to be water this time. 1 more teaspoon of water. Another half a bag of powdered sugar. And once again, another teaspoon of water. The second half of the bag of powdered sugar. You can keep on adding teaspoons of water until you reach the desired spreadable consistency. Just make sure it's not too droopy and soft. Scrape the bowl once again. it's all light and fluffy and creamy, it's time to ice the cake. I'm going to cut it into thirds so that it has 3 layers of cake and 2 layers of icing in the middle. You start by marking the cake with your eye as to where the thirds might be. If you are a little bit confused, you can put toothpicks around. You can mark the cake in thirds where you think you're going to cut it. And since you're going to cut right on top of the toothpick, give yourself a little room. This is the bottom of the cake. You want to cut the bottom piece off first. You can use another cake circle to get the cake to the cake plate. Just put it on top, turn it upside down, and there you have it. The first bottom layer of the cake. Put the first layer of cream cheese icing onto the bottom of the cake and evenly spread it around. Since this isn't a separate filling from the icing, you can go ahead and put it right to the edge. If you're doing a filling, it's best not to put the filling all the way to the edge because it'll show under the icing. So nice and smooth.
And now I'm cutting through the second middle layer.
You can use the cake circle to get the second layer off the cake. The second layer goes right on top of the first layer. Center it nicely. More icing. Smooth it once again, just like you did previously. Try to get it the same thickness of the first layer. And last but not least, and then finally the top. More icing to finish it off. You can put a lot on the top because you want it to sort of drape down over the side for when you put icing on the side, it'll have something to stick to. Otherwise it might droop down and slide off the cake. And some more on the sides. And work it all over the cake. So you kind of look at it and make sure it's even on top. You can turn the little stand to check for evenness and correct any high spots that there might be. And you can make a rough texture for it. That way it looks a little more homemade. And there you have a lovely velvet cream cheese cake. Good enough to eat.
For the larger cupcakes,
I think I'll make a rough homemade swirl for the frosting to make it match the old-fashioned look of the bigger cake. This is a more substantial cupcake for the larger appetite. For the more petite cupcakes, I like to top it off with a nice little rosette and then sprinkle some white chunky sugar on the top. And that gives it a nice sparkle. I'm going to make turquoise flowers and hot pink leaves for the larger cupcakes. Take your nail, you put a blob of icing in the middle of it, and that'll be the base for your rose. Then you twirl it while squeezing, and then you have that little hole in the top that looks like the rose is unfolding. And when it's all finished, take a pair of manicure scissors and you cut the rose off and put it right onto the cupcake. Once again, twirl and squeeze and make the petals by lifting up the tip slightly and dropping it back down. I do this rather quickly. If you don't overthink it, it tends to work better. Then you use the scissors to remove the flour and place gently on the top of the cupcake. Nice and pretty. I think hot pink leaves will complement the turquoise rose nicely. Not too big, you don't want them to stand out too much and have more of a focus than the rose. I'm making small rosebuds around the main flower and then some pink leaves to attach them together. I've made a little stand to more impressively display the cakes. It makes them look all the more delicious. Here are some examples of other ways to display and present cupcakes. Now I'm ready to cut the cake. Cupcakes don't require a plate or fork for ease of serving. Look at how easily this cake slices and serves. No embarrassing crumbling and falling apart while you're trying to serve your guests. That's really good. Cream cheese and the cocoa and the vinegar and the vanilla all work together to make a really fabulous flavor. The cake is tender, moist, it cuts well, it serves well, and your guests are going to love it. And if you aren't a baker, I'll make one for you. So thanks for sharing my kitchen with me today. I'm Cheryl Johnson of Cheryl's Catering. Bye-bye. If you'd like to have this recipe or have any cooking questions, you can email me at cherylcakeforyou@yahoo.com.